Tom had chosen the quiet life after years of service. The world outside could be loud and restless, but his ranch gave him peace. It sat several miles from the town's edge, tucked between rolling fields and tall pine trees. His home was simple, built of wood and stone with a wide porch where he often sat to enjoy the rising sun. Horses filled the barn, chickens wandered near the coop, and his old dog rested under the shade of the porch steps. Life was not perfect, but it was steady. Tom enjoyed waking early, feeding the animals, fixing fences, and keeping the land clean. He liked the smell of earth after rain, the creak of the barn door, and the whistle of wind across the open field. His neighbors were far, and that suited him well. He had given enough years to orders, rules, and loud voices. The ranch was where he could live at his own pace. That afternoon was hot. The air shimmered with heat, and the dry grass swayed lazily in the wind. Tom sat on the porch drinking cold water from a metal cup. His hat shaded his eyes, and his boots rested on the wooden step. The dog beside him raised its head and let out a low growl. Tom looked down. "Easy, boy," he said softly. But then he noticed the sound, the crunch of tires on gravel, the rumble of engines climbing the dirt road to his ranch. Dust rose in the distance, and a line of vehicles came closer. It was not one truck, but several. Black-painted trucks with shiny logos printed on the side doors. Tom narrowed his eyes and read the words as they slowed near his gate. Homeowners Association Enforcement Division. His brows drew together. His land was not part of any neighborhood. He had bought it years ago, checked the papers, and confirmed there were no ties to town rules. Yet here they were, rolling in like they had some claim over it. The truck stopped and men stepped out. Some wore uniforms that looked too polished for simple inspectors. They had radios clipped to their shoulders, sunglasses over their eyes, and a stiff way of walking that reminded Tom of recruits on their first day. A few carried clipboards, others held measuring tools, and one even wore a vest that seemed unnecessary for checking fences. The leader, tall and broad-shouldered, barked an order. The group spread quickly, moving across Tom's yard as if it already belonged to them. One started walking toward the barn. Another paced near the chicken coop. A third leaned down to check the gate latch. Tom stood slowly. His boots thudded against the wood as he stepped down from the porch. His dog followed, alert but quiet. Tom's face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Years of training had given him patience, but it had also taught him how to read a situation. "This was no friendly visit. Can I help you?" he called out firmly. His voice carried across the yard. The tall leader adjusted his sunglasses and walked forward. "We've received complaints," he said, his tone clipped and official. "Reports of unkept property, unauthorized animals, and possible safety violations. We're here to conduct a full inspection." Tom stared at him, silent for a moment. "Complaints? From who?" "From residents," the man replied quickly. Tom's jaw tightened. "There are no residents near me," he said flatly. "This ranch isn't part of your association. You've come to the wrong place." The leader gave a small laugh, though it held no humor. "Sir, every property within 10 miles of town is under our oversight. You may not realize it, but your land falls under our jurisdiction now. We're expanding, and rules must be followed. We have authority to check." Tom's dog barked once, loud and sharp. The men near the barn stopped for a moment, then continued as if nothing had happened. Tom lifted a hand to calm the dog, but his eyes never left the leader. "This is private land," Tom repeated slowly. His voice was calm, but each word carried weight. "I own it outright. You don't have authority here." The leader ignored his protest and waved to the others. "Proceed with the checklist," he ordered. Two men walked toward the barn and began peering inside. One of them scribbled notes. Another approached the tool shed and tried the lock. The gate inspector pulled out a measuring tape and began stretching it across the fence. Tom's hands curled slightly at his sides. Memories stirred in his mind. Memories of foreign soil, of men who did not listen, of times when his patience was tested in harsher ways than this. He breathed out slowly. He was not in uniform anymore, but discipline still held him steady. The leader turned back to Tom. "It'll go easier if you cooperate. If you don't, we'll have to escalate." Tom tilted his head. "Escalate?" His voice was low, but there was something in it that made the air feel heavier. The man adjusted his stance but did not answer. Instead, he looked toward his team. "Check the barn thoroughly. Make sure to take photos." Tom took a step forward. His presence alone made the man hesitate for a fraction of a second. "Listen," Tom said, "you don't know what you're walking into. I've let you come this far because I believe in staying calm, but this land is mine. Every inch of it was paid for with my own hands, and before that, I paid with years of service to this country.
If you think I'll let strangers claim it with clipboards and tape measures, you're mistaken. The leader raised an eyebrow, trying to mask his unease.
Service? You're saying you're a veteran? Tom did not answer with words. He stood tall, shoulders squared, gaze firm. The silence between them carried the answer more strongly than any speech could. For a brief moment, the leader faltered. His men, however, continued their work, unaware of the weight in the air. One shouted from the barn, "Hey, the stalls don't meet spacing requirements," writing it down. Another called from the fence, "Height's an inch short on this side." The leader regained his stance and smirked faintly. "Rules are rules. Veteran or not, you'll have to comply. If not today, then soon." Tom's dog growled again, louder this time. Tom reached down, resting a hand on its head. His calmness did not break, but inside a decision was forming. He had given them warnings. He had been patient. Now he would need to show them who they were dealing with. Not with force, not yet, but with authority that came from experience and strength they did not understand. The sun hung low, casting long shadows across the ranch. The men thought they were in control, but they had no idea the ground they stood on belonged to someone who had seen far worse than an HOA inspection. And in that silence, as the wind shifted, Tom prepared himself for what was coming. The late afternoon sun pressed hard on the land, throwing long streaks of gold across Tom's ranch. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of air that carried tension before a storm. Tom stood in the yard, his shoulders squared, eyes fixed on the men moving around his property. They walked with careless confidence, as if the land already belonged to them. They did not see the warning in his calm face or the steady patience in his stance. One of the men near the barn called out, "This feed storage is not compliant. He doesn't even have proper labeling." His voice carried with the smugness of someone who believed rules gave him power. Another man near the chicken coop shouted, "Animal count exceeds the allowed limit for this zone. He'll have to reduce them." Tom listened without moving. His dog barked again, low and sharp, but Tom kept him close with one hand. His silence was not weakness. It was calculation. He had learned long ago that rushing into anger gave others control. Control was something Tom never surrendered, not in war and not here. The leader of the group, still standing in front of him, adjusted his sunglasses. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he said. "We can wrap this up quickly if you let us finish and sign the report." Tom's voice came steady. "You don't have authority here. This ranch is private. I'll say it once more so you hear it clearly. Leave now." The leader gave a small laugh, though his eyes shifted uneasily for just a second. "Sir, with respect, rules don't bend for anyone. Veteran or not, you'll have to follow them." Tom stepped closer, the boards of the porch creaking under his boots. The movement was small, but the air around him grew heavier. The leader stiffened as Tom's shadow fell across him. "You think this is about bending rules," Tom said. "But it isn't. It's about respect. You don't walk onto a man's land uninvited. You don't treat his home like it's yours. I've given you warning. Don't test me further." For a moment, silence spread across the yard. Even the men near the barn seemed to pause, glancing back toward the porch. But the leader forced himself to smirk again, unwilling to show doubt in front of his team. He turned and shouted, "Take full inventory. Every detail. We'll file for penalties." The sound of pens scratching paper filled the air. One officer leaned against the fence, writing quickly. Another crouched near the well, measuring its cover. The group behaved like a swarm, busy and blind to the storm waiting to fall on them. Tom let them move for a while longer. His mind, disciplined from years of service, observed every step. He counted how many men there were. He studied their posture, their eagerness, and their overconfidence. He noticed how their eyes slid past him, how they treated his silence as weakness. But silence was not weakness. It was strength stored, ready to be released. Finally, Tom spoke again, his voice carrying across the yard. "You want inventory? I'll give you something better. History. This ranch was built with the money I saved after serving this country for 20 years. I gave everything I had for the flag you wear on your sleeve without thought. I buried friends who never came home. And now you step onto my ground, measuring fence posts, counting chickens, and speaking as if your clipboards carry more weight than sacrifice. You don't know me. You don't know what it took to stand here. The men froze. The only sound was the wind rattling through dry grass. The leader's smirk faded. His sunglasses hid his eyes, but his jaw tightened. One of the younger men muttered, "He's a vet?" Another, nervous now, whispered back, "He should have told us." Tom's gaze swept across them. "I don't need to tell you who I am. I live quietly. But don't mistake quiet for weakness. You've crossed a line today." The leader finally found his voice. "Sir, we respect your service, but rules are rules. We can't ignore complaints. If you don't comply, we'll escalate to legal action." Tom almost smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "Legal action," he repeated, the words slow and steady. "You think you can threaten me with paper and stamps? You don't understand. You're not just walking against a man. You're walking against everything that trained him to hold his ground when pressure rises." His voice had a weight that none of them could ignore. The younger officers shifted uncomfortably. They were beginning to realize the mistake they had walked into. But the leader pressed on, desperate not to lose control. "If you resist inspection, we'll return with more support. We'll bring enforcement. Do you want that?" Tom's eyes narrowed. "Bring whoever you want. You'll find the same answer waiting. This ranch is mine, and I will defend it, the same way I defended this land long before you learned to hold a clipboard." The dog barked again, sharp and loud. The horses in the barn kicked against the stalls, sensing the tension. The land itself seemed to echo Tom's words, as if the fields and fences stood behind him. The group wavered. Some of the men lowered their pens, unsure whether to keep writing. Others glanced at the leader, waiting for his decision. For the first time, cracks appeared in their confidence. Tom saw it clearly. He had been in enough standoffs to recognize the shift. A group that entered with boldness was now leaning toward retreat. Their leader was the only barrier keeping them in place. He took one more step forward, voice firm as stone. "This is my final word. Leave my ranch. Take your trucks, your clipboards, and your rules and go back to wherever you came from. If you set foot here again without rightful authority, I won't be as patient." The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. The leader clenched his jaw, torn between pride and reason. He looked at his men, saw their unease, and realized his hold was slipping. Slowly, he raised his hand and motioned toward the trucks. "Pack it up," he ordered, his voice strained. Relief spread across the group. They closed their notebooks, tucked away their tools, and began walking back. Their boots scuffed against the dirt as they moved quickly, eager to be gone. Tom stood still, watching each one leave. His gaze followed them until the last truck door slammed shut. The engines roared to life, and dust rose again as the convoy pulled out of his gate. Only when the sound faded into the distance did Tom finally breathe deeply. His hand moved to rest on his dog's head, calming the loyal animal. He looked over his land, the barn, the fields, the fences, and felt the stillness return. But beneath the calm, he knew this was not the end. Their leader had left with anger still burning. They would come back, and next time they might not come with clipboards alone. Tom turned his eyes to the horizon where the last of the sun dipped behind the trees. His voice was low but steady. "Let them come. I'll be ready." The dog barked once as if in agreement. The ranch stood quiet again, but the air carried a new weight. A line had been drawn, and both sides knew it. The veteran had spoken, and the war of patience had begun. The next morning, the ranch woke in peace. The air was cool, and the early sun painted the sky with soft colors. Tom moved through his routine with steady hands. He fed the horses, checked the chicken coop, and repaired a loose board on the fence. His dog followed him everywhere, tail wagging, eyes alert. But beneath the calm, Tom felt the weight of yesterday. He had not missed the anger in the leader's face as the convoy left. The man had not surrendered out of respect, but because he could not hold his team together. Pride would not let him rest. He would return, and he would not come lightly. Tom had learned long ago that preparing before trouble arrived was wiser than reacting late. He began the day with that thought. Inside his workshop, he laid out tools. He checked locks, oiled hinges, and reinforced doors. He inspected the barn, making sure every latch was strong. He adjusted the gates and sharpened the edges of farm equipment, not as weapons, but as part of readiness. As he worked, his mind went back to old memories. Years in service had taught him how to read the enemy. They rarely gave up after one failed attempt. They regrouped, returned stronger, and tested patience. The HOA men were not soldiers, but pride and authority could drive them like any force. By noon, Tom stood on the porch again. The land stretched wide around him, calm and quiet. Yet in the distance he heard it, the familiar sound of engines. Dust rose on the dirt road just as it had yesterday. This time there were more trucks. 6 of them rolled up, larger and heavier, their sides gleaming with the same bold logo. Men stepped out, twice the number from before. Some wore bright vests. Others carried folders stuffed with papers. A few had cameras slung around their necks. At the front was the same leader, his sunglasses hiding his eyes but not the sharp line of his jaw. The dog barked loudly, running a few steps forward before stopping at Tom's command. Tom did not move from the porch. He watched as the men spread out again, more disciplined than yesterday. The leader walked forward with a firm step, speaking louder this time as if to prove authority. "Mr. Tom," he called out, "we warned you yesterday. You refused inspection. Today we return with full enforcement. These men are authorized to document every violation. Refusal will result in heavy penalties and possible seizure of property." Tom's face remained calm. "You have no right to be here. My land is not under your authority. Yesterday I told you to leave. Today I'll tell you again," the leader smirked. "We brought evidence this time." He waved at the men with cameras. "Every detail will be recorded. You won't be able to deny it." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly, though his stance stayed relaxed. "Evidence only matters if it belongs to rightful law. You don't carry law here. You carry fear, and fear has no place on my land." The leader's smirk faded. He turned to his team. "Begin," he ordered. The men moved quickly. Some photographed the barn. Others crouched near the coop. One filmed the fence line while another wrote notes about the water troughs. They swarmed with purpose, more confident this time. Tom let them work for a few minutes. His silence drew their attention, and soon one of the younger men spoke nervously. "He's just standing there, sir. He's not stopping us." The leader glanced at Tom, unsettled by his stillness. "Ignore him. Keep working." Finally, Tom stepped down from the porch. His boots hit the dirt with a steady rhythm. The dog followed close, barking once before falling quiet again. Tom walked into the yard, his presence pulling every eye toward him. "Enough," Tom said firmly. His voice cut through the noise of scribbling pens and clicking cameras. The men froze where they stood. He looked directly at the leader. "You're proud of your numbers. You think more men, more cameras, more papers will break me. But you don't understand. I faced numbers before. I faced men with weapons, men with machines, men who thought they were stronger because they had more. I learned something each time. Strength is not in numbers. It is in resolve. And I will not break." The group shifted uneasily. A few lowered their cameras. The leader tried to hold his ground, but his voice wavered slightly. "You can't intimidate us with stories of the past. This is about compliance." Tom's gaze hardened. "Compliance to what? To rules that never bound me? To authority you claimed without earning? This ranch is free just as I fought to keep it, and no false claim will change that." One of the men whispered, "Sir, maybe we should check the records again. He doesn't look like he's bluffing." The leader spun on him sharply. "Quiet, do your job." Tom raised his hand, pointing at the younger man. "Listen to him. He has sense. He sees the truth." The younger man swallowed nervously, lowering his camera. Others hesitated as well, their confidence cracking. The leader grew red with anger. "If you refuse inspection again, we'll bring legal officers. You can't win against the system." Tom stepped closer. His voice dropped, steady as stone. "Systems come and go. I've seen them rise and I've seen them fall. But a man's right to his home, to the land he worked for, that does not fall. You've tested me twice. Test me a third time and you'll see how unshaken I truly am." The wind picked up, carrying his words across the field. The horses stirred in the barn. The chickens clucked nervously and the dog stood growling at Tom's side. The men looked around, their bravado fading. They were not soldiers. They were not trained to face a man who carried calm strength like armor. Their leader's commands no longer sounded certain. Finally, one of the older men in the group stepped forward. His voice was quiet but firm. "Sir, I think he's right. This isn't our ground. If we push further, we'll be stepping into something we can't control." The leader glared at him, but the team had already begun to shift back toward the trucks. Doubt spread among them, faster than any order could stop. Tom folded his arms across his chest. "Leave now while you still can. Take your papers and your cameras. When you return to your office, look at the maps again. You'll see the truth that this land was never yours to claim." The silence hung heavy. Finally, with a sharp motion of his hand, the leader snapped, "Back to the trucks." The men obeyed quickly, climbing into their vehicles. The cameras shut off, the pen stopped moving, and the dust rose again as the engines roared to life. Tom watched, his face calm, but his eyes sharp. He knew this was not the end. Pride was a stubborn enemy. The leader had lost twice now, and men like him did not forgive such defeat. As the convoy disappeared into the horizon, Tom turned back to his porch. He rested a hand on his dog's head, speaking softly. "They'll be back, boy. Next time they'll bring more than cameras." The dog barked once in answer. Tom looked at the wide land stretching before him. He felt no fear, only resolve. He had faced stronger foes than this. He had defended borders far from home. Now he would defend his own with the same spirit. The line had been drawn deeper and the storm had only begun. The following week passed with heavy silence. Tom lived his days as usual, feeding the horses, repairing tools, and tending to his fields. Yet beneath every step he felt the tension building. The quiet was not natural. It was the kind of quiet that came before a storm. Each morning he rose before the sun, walking his land as he always did, but now his eyes scanned the horizon more carefully. He checked the gates twice, tightened the locks, and made sure everything was in order. It was not fear that moved him, but discipline. A soldier did not wait for trouble to arrive before preparing. He prepared every day, so when trouble came, he was already ready. His dog stayed close, barking at the slightest noise. The horses grew restless at night, sensing the unease in the air. Even the wind seemed heavier, carrying with it the memory of the HOA trucks that had twice disturbed the peace of the ranch. Tom knew they would come again. The leader's pride would not let him rest. The man had left twice, beaten not by force but by resolve. That kind of defeat dug deep into men who built their identity on control. He would gather stronger support and he would return. On the sixth day the sound came once more, the low growl of engines rolling across the dirt road. Dust rose in the distance thicker than before. Tom set down his hammer, wiped his hands on his jeans, and stepped onto the porch. His dog barked furiously, tail stiff, ears pointed. This time the convoy was larger. Not 6 trucks, but 10. Some bore the HOA logo. Others carried markings of county enforcement. Men in formal uniforms stepped out, their belts heavy with radios and legal folders. At their center was the same leader, his sunglasses reflecting the sun, his stride more forceful than ever. The yard filled with noise as the group spread across the land. Officers carried cameras, clipboards, and even long measuring poles. 2 men began setting up signs near the entrance, declaring the land under inspection hold. Others gathered near the porch, their eyes fixed on Tom. The leader stepped forward. His voice was louder this time, meant to reach not just Tom, but every man behind him. "Mr. Tom, we warned you. You refused compliance twice. Today we come with legal authority. The county stands with us. If you do not cooperate, we will file for immediate seizure of property. Do you understand?" Tom's face remained calm. He did not move from his place on the porch. His dog barked once, then fell quiet under his hand. "I understand your words," Tom said evenly. "But understanding does not mean agreement. You stand here waving papers, but papers do not erase truth. This land is mine, paid in full, protected by law greater than any you carry in your folders." The leader held up a document, waving it for all to see. "This is official order. It states your land now falls under HOA jurisdiction due to expansion. Refusal will be noted as violation." Tom's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice stayed steady. "You think words on paper can override ownership. But I know the law. I read every clause before buying this ranch. Your jurisdiction ends 5 miles short of here. You are trespassing." Murmurs spread through the group. Some officers glanced at the document, doubt flickering across their faces. Tom took a step forward, his boots striking the wooden porch. His presence carried weight. "You walk onto my ranch a 3rd time, more prepared than before. But strength is not in numbers and it is not in papers. It is in standing on truth, and I will stand here until the end." The leader stiffened, but Tom did not stop. He raised his voice, letting it carry across the yard. "You see a ranch. I see a life built from sweat and sacrifice. I fought for this land long before I bought it. Not just here, but overseas, on soil where every breath was earned. I buried friends who never came home. I carried weight heavier than any fine you threatened me with. And now you come with pens and folders thinking you can shake me. You cannot. Not today. Not ever." The words hung in the air. Silence followed, heavy and unbroken. The men shifted uneasily, some lowering their papers, others glancing toward the leader for direction. The leader tried to regain control. He turned to his men. Proceed with the inspection. Ignore the speech. Regard every violation. But the group hesitated. The confidence they had carried on arrival now wavered. They had seen men resist before, but not like this. Not with calmness that felt unshakable. Not with words that cut deeper than any argument. Tom stepped down from the porch fully now, standing tall in the yard. His dog followed, growling low. The horses neighed from the barn. The chickens clucked nervously. It was as if the land itself stood with him. You think this place is yours to take, Tom said, his voice firm. But look around. Do you see your sweat in the soil? Do you see your hands in the fences, your hours in the barn, your breath in the air? No, every board, every nail, every post carries my work, and no man can take what he did not build. One of the county officers lowered his clipboard slowly. His voice was uncertain. Sir, maybe he has a point. If the boundary line is wrong, then this order may not hold. The leader spun on him sharply. Stay in line. Do your job, but doubt had already spread. A few others stepped back, unsure whether they wanted to be part of this. They had expected a stubborn farmer, not a veteran who spoke with the weight of lived history. Tom folded his arms across his chest. His eyes swept across them all. You can leave now with dignity, or you can stay and bury yourselves in shame. The choice is yours. But I promise you this, if you return again, I will not only speak. I will act, and my actions will be as steady as my words. The air was heavy, every man feeling the truth behind those words. The leader clenched his jaw, his pride burning. But his men were slipping away from him. They were not soldiers. They were clerks, officers, inspectors. They were not trained to stand against resolve like this. Finally, with a sharp motion of his hand, the leader snapped, back to the trucks. The men obeyed quickly. Clipboards closed, cameras lowered, papers tucked away. They moved with haste, eager to be gone. Engines roared to life once more, and the convoy began to retreat. Tom stood still, watching them go. He did not move until the last truck disappeared into the horizon, dust settling in the air. His dog barked once, and he placed a steady hand on its head. They'll be back, boy, he said quietly. Next time, pride won't let them come with papers alone. Next time, they'll come with something heavier. He turned toward his ranch, his eyes calm but sharp. He had faced worse storms, and when the final test came, he would be ready. The veteran had spoken again, and the line had been carved deeper into the ground. The morning of the 7th day began quiet. Too quiet. Tom felt it the moment he stepped outside. The wind carried no birdsong, no natural peace. It carried weight, as if the earth itself knew something was coming. He poured water for his horses, checked the feed bins, and secured the barn doors. His dog followed him closely, tail stiff, barking at shadows. Tom looked across the wide field and saw the distant road. Dust was already rising. This time, there was no convoy of trucks. It was larger. A line of vehicles stretched across the horizon. Pickup trucks, county vans, and 2 larger armored enforcement vehicles rolled forward. The sound filled the land, heavy and unbroken. Tom's heart beat steady. His hands did not shake. He walked calmly to his porch and stood tall, arms folded across his chest. He had known this moment would come. The leader's pride would never let him stop. Now the test had reached its final stage. As the vehicles halted, men poured out. Not 10, not 20, but nearly 40. Some wore uniforms, others wore suits. A few carried equipment, cameras, radios, even drones that buzzed in the air. At the center stood the same leader, his sunglasses reflecting the morning light, his jaw tight with determination. Behind him stood 2 men in black suits holding thick folders, lawyers. On the far side, armed enforcement officers tightened their belts and stood ready. The leader's voice rang out across the ranch. Tom, this is the end. You have resisted long enough. Today we take control. If you stand in the way, we will remove you. This is your final warning. Tom raised his hand slowly, signaling silence. His voice carried across the yard with calm strength. You have come 3 times. Each time with more men, more papers, more noise. And each time you left, not because I forced you, but because you saw truth. You return again, thinking numbers will change what is right. But numbers do not make wrong into right. Truth stands, whether 1 man or 1,000 oppose it. The leader gestured to the men with folders. One of the lawyers stepped forward, opening the document. This land now falls under HOA extension by official vote of the county board. You are ordered to vacate. Refusal will result in immediate forceful removal. Tom shook his head. His voice stayed calm. I studied that vote. I studied your maps. Your line ends 5 miles short. This ranch was never included. You are stretching authority beyond the law, and I have proof. From his pocket, Tom pulled a folded document, his deed and the original county map. He held it high for all to see. This land is mine, protected by state law and federal law. Your board has no power here. You bring lawyers, but I bring truth. Murmurs rose in the crowd. Some officers leaned closer, whispering. Others shifted, doubt in their eyes. The drones buzzed overhead, recording everything. The leader's face darkened. Do not listen to him, he barked. Proceed with the removal. At that moment, Tom raised his voice louder than ever before. It rang across the land like a command on a battlefield. Every man here, listen. You were told this was legal. But ask yourselves, why do they come with trucks and armor if the law is truly on their side? Why do they need numbers if their claim is clean? They come because they know their power is weak without fear. But fear has no place here. Not on this soil. Not in this country. Not in front of a man who has stood against greater threats than this. The officers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. Others looked toward the lawyers for confirmation. The silence grew heavy. Tom stepped forward, his boots striking the dirt with steady rhythm. His presence filled the space. I fought for freedom overseas. I bled for this flag. I stood in places where every breath was earned. And I will not stand aside while men twist law for greed. If you wish to remove me, you will not face a farmer. You will face a veteran who carries the weight of his brothers who never came home. And I promise you this, you may take papers, you may take words, but you will not take my land. The air froze. His words carried truth too sharp to ignore. Even the horses in the barn neighed as if answering his call. His dog barked, circling his feet. The leader's face twisted with anger. He turned to his men. Do it now. Move in. But before they could, one of the county officers stepped forward, shaking his head. No, he's right. This line is outside our authority. I reviewed the maps myself. We're crossing into territory that does not belong to the HOA. Another officer nodded. We can't do this. This is trespassing. I won't be part of it. One by one, others stepped back. The doubt spread like fire. The lawyers whispered among themselves nervously. The enforcement team shifted uneasily, no longer certain of their orders. Tom's voice rang out again, clear and steady. You see the truth now. If you continue, you will not only face me, you will face the law when the truth comes out. Every camera, every drone, every witness here will carry proof of your corruption. Leave now, and you may still hold your dignity. Stay, and you bury yourselves in shame. The leader shouted, his pride breaking. Cowards, all of you. Do your jobs, but the men did not move. Instead, more of them stepped back, lowering their gear. The lawyers closed their folders, unwilling to stand against what was becoming clear. Finally, one of the senior county officers turned to the leader. His voice was firm. This ends here. We will not move forward. He owns this land. The law is on his side. We're leaving. The leader's face turned red with rage. He wanted to argue, to scream, but he saw the truth. His men had left him. His power had collapsed. He was alone. Slowly, one truck after another pulled back. Engines roared to life, and the convoy began to retreat. One by one, the vehicles disappeared down the dirt road. The armored cars followed last, leaving only dust in their wake. The leader stood there, fists clenched, eyes burning with prideful anger. For a moment it seemed he might stay behind alone, but at last, with no support left, he turned sharply and stormed into his truck. His tires spun, throwing dirt, and then he too was gone. Silence returned to the ranch. The dust settled. The fields breathed again. Tom stood in the yard, shoulders straight, eyes steady. His dog barked once, then fell silent, tail wagging in victory. The horses calmed, the land at peace again. He turned slowly, walking back to his porch. He sat down on the steps, the morning sun warm on his face. He felt no triumph, only calm. He had not fought with fists or weapons. He had fought with truth, discipline, and the weight of a life built on honor. The ranch was safe. For now, and for always. He looked out across the fields, the fences, the barns, the open sky. His voice was quiet but strong. This land stands free, and so do I. And with that, the veteran's final stand was complete.